Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Mastering Retention Podcast. Today, we have a very special guest with us. We have Meric Atesalp. I think I got it close. Yeah, cool. Cool. Well, we have so much fun stuff to dive into today. Long history of stuff. Actually, before we do, I always like to ask people what's your story? How'd you get into games? Because I'm pretty sure Tilting Point was like your first gig into games, right? And it was kind of like a big leap. So yeah, what's your story? How'd you end up here?
I mean, growing up, I was a crazy gamer. Like, I would steal my dad's old PC to play Rayman on it. My brother and I would have issues splitting the PC, always back and forth. And, for all of my favorite IPs, I some kind of designed a board game or a card game growing up, like Harry Potter board game or something, but just to entertain me and my friends. So games have always been in my life. But professionally, by trade, I studied engineering at Columbia University. So for a long time, I thought I was going to do something more technical. But then, close to my graduation, when pretty much most engineers in my class were doing, I'm going to get into consulting, I'm going to get into banking. I just didn't really I would go to those meetings and never felt like I belonged there. So I said, you know what, I'm just going to hear my heart and just follow gaming. And I applied to Tilting Point, and that was my first position. And I've changed quite a few roles in TP too, just to learn what I like better, the industry better. I started with user acquisition first, managing big portfolio's of all of our published games, and learned the UA scape. And then I realized that I like the game core better than the marketing side of things. And I basically became the game evaluation manager in the company, with all the candidates coming to Tilting Point that want to publish their games. I would sit down, look at the data, I would play the game, play test, and then basically decide if we want to sign this game or not, which is quite a big decision. But it was a really fun role. But then I just figured out that product management is my thing, and just working on a single game, making it better, improving it, making that fun factor go up. And right now, I've actually, I'm not in Tilting Point anymore. I'm now in Pixelberry. We're working on Storyloom, which is a new user-generated interactive story platform that's been in the works for a couple of years, but we're going to be launching that soon.
So I have so many questions right now.
Let's
But okay, so Storyloom, UGC, I've always been a fan of user generated content and stuff, but I feel like these types of games or experiences and things are just the hardest to really get going, because at the beginning, you have no one writing stories, and you have no one to read those stories, even if you did write them. So you got the chicken and the egg problem. So I'm curious, and you don't have to divulge all of your secrets or whatnot, and I'm sure every game's a little bit different, but you have that UA mindset from the past plus where you are in the future. How could you think about launching a UGC type game in today's world, today's post IDFA market?
I think at least our strategy has been, Pixelberry has great connections, that writers, the authors, and what they're trying to do is start the journey from reaching out to these writers, making them publish their small stories that are really good in the platform first. So users, as in not just any regular user, but people who have already established themselves in a way. They're firstly creating the groundwork content, and these are really good stories. I have this one favorite, what was it called? I think it was I'm more into comedy, and usually in these interactive story or story platforms, it's usually romance or that kind of stuff. Here there's my monster therapist, which is every episode this new monster goes to a therapist, and they go through the problems of this monster. The past episode was, I think, about a werewolf, and then the therapist is show me the real you, and then the werewolf turns into a werewolf and stuff, all that funny stuff. So that's been the initial content creation. And what's going to happen, I think, is we're going to be the smartest thing to do in this current post IDFA world is to like hit those micro influencers. It's the term I'm going to use, but those people who have stories who would like to use this platform, but they don't have a huge reach. But if we somehow hit 100, 1,000, or 10,000 of those, they will publish on this platform, and their friends and their community will start reading. And that's going to be, I think, bringing up a large number of users in, at least at the first stage.
Yeah, and you guys already have Choices, which is like one of the top kind of story-driven type, games that are out there. Like, did you guys do any sort of UGC in that as well? Like, do you have relationships with folks that are there, or were all those stories like written in-house?
I think not, because I just joined the Storyloom site a month ago, but I think we just have a lot of authors that we have relationship with in Pixelberry, and some of them actually founded Pixelberry. They're the ones we're publishing, not like just users left and right, and not like user-generated content.
Gotcha. Yeah, I do know that like in some companies that I've seen, you kind of develop an expertise, and this seems to be the best way to be successful at making games from what I've seen. I could be very wrong on this because making games is hard, right? But if you look at like Playrix, they kind of found this expertise in these like, match 3 puzzly casual type games. You look at like MyHoYo or Hoyo Verse or whatever they're called today. Genshin Impact was like the breakout game that everyone learned about. But like if you backtrack their different games like Honkai Third or whatever, you can see the starting points and where they discovered the things that would ultimately become Genshin. And you look at their new game, Honkai Rail, you can see like they basically built this like moat of content and different pieces and learnings and stuff, and kind of were able to catapult it to the next level. So I was just like, well, that could very well be the case of, hey, we built all these connections with Choices. Now we're going to take it to the next level, but we already have that stuff, which makes it very difficult for, any type of competitor to come in and do that thing too.
Definitely. I mean, there's all this like engine that's been built by these companies where, there, of course, it makes sense for them to just reutilize it and make it better. Yeah, totally. Okay. So before we get into product manager stuff, I want to talk a little bit about game evaluation, because I feel like everyone in gaming, myself included, we see a lot of like new games. And how do you figure out like if this game has it or not? Because I've played and I've seen some games that like by all accounts, like this thing should be killing it. And then it gets out there and it just like doesn't. And I can't really say why not. Whereas something else that I wouldn't have guessed suddenly just like explodes and takes over the chart. So I'd love to hear all about like game evaluation. Man, doing that job was one of the most fun times of, I think, my career, because it's just, there's so much innovation that you're seeing. But basically, we're not getting the games just, I'm not scouring through the all of App Store to just check every game. That's an impossible task. But we had some kind of some scrappers that would show us some games that had good RPI. So to see, which ones are actually getting good revenue per install, and maybe that was the starting point for us. And then we would get into, are these people already published? Do they need us? Are these like huge companies? After scrapping those, we would get maybe about 5 to 10% of these games that are just like made by small size developers that could utilize some kind of publishing or UA help. And then on top of that, we would have these like people reaching out to us just saying, hey, can you check my game, etc. But one of the first things we would look at is just, if they have an MMP, we would definitely just check everything in there, just revenue, retention, cost, every data. And then if they don't, we would use Google Play, App Store, Connect data just to understand, where they are in terms of retention and install. And we had some kind of bars. And if they're not above it, we basically say, you know what, I would play the game and I would figure out a few things to improve their day one retention or something. And that usually the problem would be day one retention. So something in their first time user experience that doesn't make sense, or them putting too many monetization elements in from the first page. or several bugs, etc. So slowly we would pass people through the next stage and next stage, and at one point we would test their game too, just like do a user acquisition campaign to try to get a positive ROAS. But this was also, when I did this, was pre-IDFA, so that point of time was just way more optimistic for gaming. Now it's more of a difficult task for sure.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Were there ever any instances where you passed on a game and it like blew up and you really like, what did you miss?
That's such a good question. We had one, and what was that? Idle Miner Tycoon.
Oh yeah.
Something like that. I think that, or one of its competitors, we've missed on, and because they didn't have the good data, and we've done the test and it was just not performing, because we need to put it on a database, the data side of things, and we were thinking everything with, okay, positive ROAS is what we need, because we're, as a publisher, you're splitting the upside with the developer, so we also need to have enough upside minus the cost to share. We want the developer to be able to get something at least. There were some occasions that the game was minutely profitable, but we had to say, what, work on XYZ, and we kept that relationship tight. And that game was one of those, and the feeling was disastrous, of course, because we see how much revenue that game made later on, and I've got asked questions, for example, but when you have data to prove your point, I guess. But there are also games that I have passed just for a sentimental value, etc., that they were doing something more creative with their art, etc. So those games have also performed well. Sorry, my cat's invading. Whoop, you go.
So let's pretend that it's actually Idle Miner Tycoon and you played the game. Like, was there anything about the game that, like, reflecting back, that should have stood out to you as like, oh, this is going to be a good one? Or on the flip side, like, did you publish a game that turned out to be a flop, and like on looking back, you realize that in playing the game, there was something that you noticed or something that you felt that was just off or not quite there? Like, is it really all about the data, or are there some things that you should be thinking or feeling in terms of actually playing the game?
100%, but it's just so difficult when you have hundreds of games coming to you. You can add your sentimental input in things and add your own perspective, but at one point when the number is too high, you just have to make those decisions. But when you say are there any games that you regret? Definitely a few that passed through our net, but then a few that we published that were, I don't want to name one, but there was a match 3 game that we made with an IP, and it was just we were so excited for it, but then we realized it just was not a good mismatch, and the IP was not so fun, and we put a lot of eggs in one basket, so to say.
Yeah. So for anyone that is thinking about publishing a new game, maybe in this post IDFA world or something like that, what are some, what are 2 or 3 things that you'd be thinking about or looking for, I guess, to, find success today?
I guess, are they trying to find a publisher? Or are they trying to self-publish? Okay, let's go with they're trying to find a publisher, for example. And I think there's Tilting Point had a very original model of that UA model, where we did the UA, where we took all the costs and we shared the upside. That model was copied throughout now. There we see a lot of other companies do a similar thing. I think definitely one thing you have to find out is, do they have a good genre match for you? Are you going to a publisher in the hopes of publishing a match 3 and they have no match 3 experience? Then that's not going to work for you. Definitely try to see at least you coincide in that bigger genre area. And then in terms of, check their other published games and see the performance there, and then take that step, I think. Also seeing, I think one of the biggest powers of a publisher is the featuring or platform relations, that kind of a thing. Do you see their games being often spotlighted on Apple or Google Play, or do you see their games on other platforms like Windows Store or Switch? Check that too, because one good thing TP did was definitely they had a good featuring mindset, a great relationship, and then publishing successful games, maybe second on Windows Store, and then on Switch, which we did on the game that I'm a product manager of, SpongeBob Krusty Cook-Off. And that definitely like goes beyond what IDFA has hurt in our game, that UA mindset, but we can publish it on all other platforms too.
Cool. Very cool. Okay. So let's talk about product management a little bit. So what the heck is a product manager? Because I feel like everyone has a different definition. So yeah, what does it mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think the mini CEO description is a funny one. And it often doesn't work when there's more product managers in one project. But basically, product managers own that segment that they're on within that game. I was the product manager of a game, and I was the sole product manager, so I was the owner of the title. But there might be, in Pixelberry, I'm just managing live ops and monetization, and I'm basically responsible from all the success and the failure of it. I'm trying to facilitate, the connections with leadership, getting approvals, getting people together, writing the specs, getting everyone in a meeting. But also I'm not doing production work, one might say. Often that line is a little like shifty. Producer, product manager, sometimes there's only one, sometimes they do separate works. It depends on the company too, I think.
Yeah, sometimes I see it interchangeably used with, like, I don't know if you guys have like an executive producer or a game director as well.
We have producers, but no, not like game director. We had that in Tilting Point, a game director or a studio head in something.
Cool. Okay. So for folks that are maybe like wanting to get into product management or wanting to be a better product manager, like what are 2 to 3 like core skills and competencies that you think like they should be like working on or seeking to learn?
I think when we're one thing I'm going to say is game product management and non-game product management are quite different. And so I have a friend who's a product manager in Google, and we talk about the job that we do, and they're like 80% different, that maybe 20% they coincide in that, like we're spec writing, etc. But as a PM in gaming, I think you feel a little bit you fill more shoes. You do more roles than just a tech PM. You dabble with data. You dabble with production at one point. You definitely, if there's no game designer, you do competitive research, etc. There's a lot more that you're doing. And to be a good game PM, I think one important thing is just whenever I'm watching TV. My boyfriend hates this, but I basically have I'm on my phone and I'm playing competitive games. I'm just like not like half focusing there, half focusing on my phone. I'm downloading new games, top 100 games on App Store. I just go through them to see what clicks. I think one good PM in the gaming ecosystem can do is just like a lot of research. And there's games that come up maybe every 20 or 30 games that I play that provide a different mechanic or a different monetization style, etc. And those are the ones that I'm like, let me just take a note of this and note it down so I can employ it better. And then I think a good PM also just, maybe this is everyone, but they need to have good notes. Like if you come across something very interesting, or in a presentation or in a call with your teammates, they say something that makes you tick, you have to take that note and then rehash it later. Maybe that's going to be a product idea. Maybe you grow it to a bigger thing. Those are the things, like ideas hardly stick. So we need to do a better job as PMs to like hash them, also like bring them up. And then maybe lately this is my like last year and on, I've been doing this more, but I've been talking to my players more, my customers more. Like we had a Discord on SpongeBob, and I've been reaching out to our VIP players, our top 1% players, just to see what they like about the game, what they do not like about the game, what's going stale, etc. For example, we had a few notes from our players that the game was kind of running stale in terms of the modes we have. So we created this new game mode that kind of matched choose your own adventure with a like a dungeon crawler kind of a thing. And it was like you start from a node on the left, and you pick which path you want to take, and you get different power-ups, and you play different kitchen levels, etc. And they get hard, easy, etc. And the user picks the journey they take, and this definitely like revitalized the seasonal events we were doing for a long time.
That's awesome. Okay, so I have a lot of questions here from that. So you mentioned like a good gaming PM is kind of always playing like other people's games and stuff. What's an example of a monetization tactic that you uncovered in somebody else's game that you were like, oh, that's like super awesome, I should make note of that?
Let me see. I don't remember the game, but one game that I played, for example, didn't have just a free and a premium battle pass, but they had a premium plus battle pass, like 3 tracks. And this was a more hardcore game, so you can see that people would spend more in these kind of games. Like it was a more, I think it was a character collection, and it was sci-fi based one. Maybe it's one of the Star Treks, maybe, but this really worked for them because there's a community of users who are down to spend more, maybe $5 or $10 more per battle pass cycle, and this is that extra feedback that they're looking for to spend. That was an interesting one. Let me see if there's any more that I can remember. Yeah, I'll let me think on it. Maybe I'll remember a few more things.
Yeah. Well, you already talked about that mechanic of, I forget what it's called in AFK Arena, but it's like where you go into the dungeon and you like progress from battle to battle and you get little boosts and power ups and stuff. And you guys did that version within SpongeBob, which is cool. But do you have any other examples of mechanics that you found in other games that you're like, oh, this is super cool, this could solve like this problem back in my game?
I think one of the biggest learning that we had the past year and maybe 2 years is that mini games. The mini games definitely not only help bring the UA cost down, because you can do just UA specific to that mini game, but also they provide an engagement, a daily engagement to the user. On SpongeBob, we integrated like a match 3D kind of a new game. I don't know if you know that, but do you know that game Match 3D, where there's like a lot of pile of items on your board, and you're trying to bring them, and then if they're matched, they leave the pile. That kind of game we've constructed, and I think before I was leaving, we were gonna implement it. Mini games is the one that we definitely thought about, like a daily engagement way.
Yeah, is that more on the user acquisition side of things, so you can like show different pseudo fake ads or whatnot, or is that actually more of like a live ops type event that you've seen?
I think this was a daily event that we were planning, that we saw that, luckily for SpongeBob, your CPIs are low because it's a well-known IP. Usually CPI was not our problem. We were trying to always increase engagement and retention, and this is one of the targets we had for that.
Cool. Yeah, we've seen a lot of people using UserWise to kind of like customize the ad that they saw to actually the mini game version that they get once they start up the game, or different things like that. So I was curious.
Yeah,
that's cool. I haven't really thought of them as like a driver of engagement and stuff, but it makes sense. Very cool. Okay. You talked about the importance of taking notes. What have you found that works well for like, taking notes? Like, do you drop them in like a personal Slack or Notion, or what do you use, and why does it work for you?
I think I just use my Apple Notes on my phone for most things. And then every week, I'm gonna lie if I say every week, every month or so, I sit down and get my notes from there to a drive. And then that's when I decide to, if I want to work on that idea, or if I want to like put that in the backlog, etc. And then one thing that I've been doing on meetings is that Google, if you are connected, if you have a Google calendar, if your companies through that, you can start a docs and you can add like meeting notes. And I have this whole like notes folder with every meeting's notes with people, and I see the date, I see whom I spoke to, I see action items, I see bullet points. That's been a big lifesaver for me.
Very cool. Okay, so you talked about coming up with these ideas for monetization tactics, mechanics, things like that. Here's a problem that I personally struggle with, and I believe other PMs have this problem as well. How do you vet ideas? And maybe like rephrasing it a little bit, how do you prioritize something when you already have 1,000 other priorities on your like Jira list? Like, how do you figure out what you should be doing today and tomorrow and next week?
Yeah, I mean, and this is one of my favorite topics, prioritization, because I think there's a way to quantify it. And when I'm gonna go more into the future side of things rather than like every small A/B test, etc. We can go
Yeah,
nitty,
that's perfect.
but like let's talk about bigger ideas. I've been a like user motivation convert for the past 2 years. I use the Quantic Foundry like motivation scales. I don't know if you've seen it, but like a competition, community, strategy, power, story. These are all kind of like user motivations. And
Yeah.
what I've done is, if there's, and I actually have made a talk on this in Seattle, and I can share this with you. But we basically rank all of these for our game. I think every company, every game maker should do this. Like, does discovery matter for our users? Does fantasy matter? Does story matter? If you give a point from 10, first you grade your game, and then you also grade your users. Maybe you work with your users to understand, as a cooking game lover, what is their motivators playing this game. You understand them better, and then you're trying to close the gap. Maybe your game just doesn't have enough challenge for a cooking game genre standards, but your users want that. So next of your futures should definitely cater to that challenge motivation. Or maybe your game is missing that design element, and that's when you should cater to that. And all of these future ideas, I also score from out of 10, these points, and then I add them up. I weigh them, different tactics, and then I also talk to my engineers and artists to get a production cost and production time. And then by dividing these scores, you get a good indicator of your priorities. That's the system I've had for the past years.
That's very interesting. So do you kind of start with like understanding your players of like, hey, my players fall into like these two categories. They're like competitive and they're social, so we don't care about these other things. Or do you try to get like a little bit of each to make it more like applicable to larger player bases, if you know what I'm saying?
I think it depends on how hardcore your game is. If your game is all about competition challenges, I don't think it makes sense for you to add a story component to it. But if your game is on more of a casual side of things, you want to hit that lower CPI, you want to hit more users, and that's when I think you can a little diverge and try new things. But I think, again, the biggest learning I had is talk to your users and ask what they want. Our game already has a lot of strategy elements and fantasy elements. Do we need more competition, more community, more discovery? Talk to them and maybe send a survey to understand what they require. Yeah.
Interesting. So I saw a post from my buddy Steve Fowler yesterday on LinkedIn, which was interesting. So he was talking about his time at Blizzard,
Yeah.
and how his boss at the time would always have them ask a series of questions to developers on the team. They'd say, describe your game. What are the core player benefits of your game? What do you want players to feel when they're playing your game? What core values do you believe in your game? And what is the core idea or essence of the game? And generally, he found that 9 times out of 10, the responses were just all over the board completely. And so it's like, okay, if our team that's been working on this thing for who knows how long can't even get aligned on this stuff, how do we expect our players to get there? Do you think those types of questions would be good for the overall game and also maybe good like at the feature level?
Definitely. I think some of these questions could be combined into one. I
Hmm.
think maybe I definitely respect his method, but maybe combining a few of these questions to get to that core of the question better. And that way, maybe there won't be that many differences. Core values of the game or core essence of the game can, cater to that similar answer or different answers depending on the player. Definitely, I think asking similar questions about the future. What does the user get? Like, what's the entertainment fun factor is a big thing. And I've been listening to a lot of your podcasts, and a lot of people bring this up. Like, what makes the game tick for the user? It's all about the core loop, and that's one of the discoveries one needs to have as a game maker for sure.
That's great. Okay. I was also kind of wondering, um, you mentioned kind of talking to players, especially like VIP players and stuff. Um, I imagine that as some developers or designers, especially the introverts among us, which tend to be a lot of us, I think about having to go and find these players and talk to them, like they're probably got some butterflies in their stomach right now.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, how did you go and find these VIP players? How did you talk to them? How did you orient it so you weren't just like, oh, I talked to this person once and now I'm getting like hit with like a million things from them, throughout the week, and I just feel completely overwhelmed. I can't even do my job, at the core. Um,
Yeah.
what's a method that you found works well for talking to players? Because I think everyone can agree that there's value in it, but how do you do it in a manageable way?
Yeah. I think what we had was sorry, we had a Discord for the channel, and it was for the game, and it was very well moderated by our community members. And we had a channel called Ask Developers, and there's always a few people that want to engage with the developers most. And I think just having a mental note of these people is definitely going to help. And then we would send a survey maybe in that channel for some user feedback, and we would ask their Discord title, Discord name, and we would recognize those patterns. Those who comment a lot would give us a lot of feedback, and sometimes I would go out of my way and just message them. I would be like, can I ask you a few more questions? I think that's the way to go if you are a little like introspective, and you can do more. You can ask just questions one at a time. You don't have to have a call like what we're doing right now. And definitely like come from a developer mindset and trying to better the game. But we've had some occasions where the players just asking me a lot more questions about the roadmap, and asking gems from me, etc. And that's when I usually draw the line. Often I would just say a kind note, but I would end it there, and then like the community members would often help me with those.
Gotcha. So here's a way that I've heard. I think my buddy Javier Barnes was the first person that recommended this to me.
Yeah.
And he said what he found worked well is it's great that you have that like ask a dev channel, but for most people working at the game, they don't have time to just sit on that channel all day to see the questions that are there. So what he did is he would say, okay, every Friday at like 1 p.m. or 3 p.m. or whatever, I'm going to spend an hour like on this call. And if you guys want to come talk to me, you can come talk. This is the time. This is when you do it. And it was really good for him because he could have those conversations with players. It was time boxed, so he knew when it was going to be. It was also kind of nice for them too, because with that random Discord channel, they might put a comment in there. They don't know if I'm going to get a response to that in 5 minutes, in 5 days, 5 weeks, but by having that, hey, I can just go talk to them on Friday. So I'll just do that. I know when they're going to be there, what they're going to be doing. I can come in, talk to them. And that seemed to work really well for their game that they're working on. Curious, you think that would work well across other games and genres?
I think that's a great idea. I think I actually had the chance to work with Javier, and he told me about this too. It makes sense, but when your community grows a lot, like SpongeBob, we were talking about a huge number of users in the Discord and just bombarding with questions. I think that's the time when, we've had one of these syncs, in person, kind of a call with the channel, but and let me tell you, we get a lot of kids commenting random things, a lot of swear words, a lot of just things you don't want to answer, you don't want to acknowledge, and then you're giving that a platform too, and that's often risky. And with our game, SpongeBob, it was a huge IP, and it's a Nickelodeon, a children's IP. We had to moderate these Discord channels often. So if you can really afford that, maybe if your reach is smaller, I say go with that. But sometimes I think having, just seeing what's been asked, just filtering through all that horrible sentences and then going with correct answer is the way to go.
Yeah. What about segmented messages and invites to players to be like, hey, I only want to send this message to invite people to talk to me that are guild members of guilds that have a rank over this level, like the top 100 or something, or I want to talk to these VIP people, so that you kind of significantly slim down that list of players that you're talking to, I guess.
That was our VIP group. We've created a VIP group from some of our high spenders, but also some of our top, engager users. And we've combined them about, very small group, 1,000 people or something. We've created a specific, channel for them. And that's when, if I really needed help about the future, etc., that's the community that I would speak to. And of course, we've had a similar thing, we were using Lean Plum at the time, campaign structure, just hitting those users, making them, enter their emails, go on Discord to join the channel, etc. And of course, not a lot of them were joining at the end, but that small group that did, we kept tight.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay. So you've kind of recently jumped from just your standard product manager to a senior product manager. What's that like? What's that kind of mean for you? Do you have a team of PMs under you now? What sort of challenges have come with that?
No, I think one of the best things as for a PM is to usually a PM is a lone wolf. That's also the one that brings the team together, weirdly enough. And I'm not at a role right now that I'm managing people, but in my, as a senior product manager, or as a product manager in Tilting Point, I managed a huge game with 80 million installs. There is no one above me really managing me.
Yeah.
From our studio head. Here, I'm just now focusing on the monetization and live ops side of things. It depends really on the company needs and how much they can afford and how many, what's their head count, etc. I really don't believe in titles after seeing that. I think it matters more a person's just impact, and also years of tenure maybe in gaming. And not only in product too, because I think, my experience as a UA manager, game evaluation manager, those were not just years that I've wasted. That I learned a lot. I learned all the KPIs. I've, so much that I still utilize my UA knowledge to this day. So, game years is I think what matters as a product manager.
Gotcha. Okay. We're getting down to time here, so I'm going to try to squeeze everything else in. So you worked with a really big IP, SpongeBob. Tell me what it's like working with an IP. I imagine that there's some benefits and there's probably some like, hassles and downfalls that come with it. So yeah,
Yeah.
tell me all about working with an IP. When does it make sense? When would you avoid it?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great, conversation topic. It does take a village. Like, you cannot manage an IP as a small studio, unfortunately. That's why having a publisher behind you helps. IPs have crazy lists of requirements from you, from assets, from the words that you can use, from specific, SpongeBob looks weirdly. SpongeBob should not be angled at that point. SpongeBob's nose looks big. There's all these things that you have to acquire a lot of knowledge through time. And thankfully, our creative team did do that. And for, I think it's been 4 years now, we've been acquiring all that information. And now, at this point, we're also doing a second SpongeBob title. They were at Tilting Point. It's easier to add a second game from same IP rather than doing like 5 different IPs too, because that's all of a learning process. Like the creative approval process would really slow us down, Tom. Like it would be, and this is not because of Nickelodeon. It's just a lot of back and forths, like we would send them the finished assets, they would come back with comments, we would send them again. If you don't have the IP, this would take you just a week. With the IP, 2-3 weeks. So
Mm,
that was the biggest problem. But I mean, the benefits of an IP, especially an IP like SpongeBob, which is like as an idea centered around fun, and like
yeah,
everything about
yeah.
SpongeBob is fun. Is such a huge thing. Same with like Marvel. There's these IPs that are very like, I think studios should feel really lucky that they have it. It really was a blessing working on a game like that.
That's great. Yeah. So benefits, it sounds like it can bring you a lot of users. It already has some like things built into it. Downfall is that it probably adds more time to your workflows and how you're doing things or whatnot. Makes
Yeah.
sense. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the Turkish gaming ecosystem. So, there's been some crazy big, games that have come out of Turkey, with Peak Games and now Royal Match and maybe this new one that they're launching too. I forget what it's called. So yeah, talk to me about Turkey. What's going on there?
What's going on there? It's so funny. As soon as this boom started happening, I left the country. This is the funniest thing. I wish I was there to experience it, but luckily I have a lot of contacts there, and I've been reached out a lot, especially when I was at Tilting Point, just for publishing needs, etc. There's a lot of a few years ago when the boom first started, it was just a few companies really getting it, and getting lucky too, I think, is a big and then there's a lot of learnings coming from that, Peak, Rolik groups, and then them starting their own companies like Dream.
Mhm.
Spike definitely helped. I've had the chance to like consult a company called Jive Games recently. They're working on their own kind of game. Everyone's really trying to make it, and the thing is, now the whole country is aware of it. So universities are training people to get into gaming. Developers are just more getting more specific, and emphasis is on like tech of games, Unity, etc. Artists are coming from a lot of ad agency artists are now joining game companies, for example, which one of my agency friends told me, we can't hire talent because game companies can pay more, and then they work less, better hours there. And I'm like, they deserve that.
Huh, yeah, that's cool. Okay. A final topic. I know you do a lot of stuff with the LGBTQ stuff, and working in gaming. So yeah, tell me all about that stuff. What are you up
Yeah,
to?
I as every minority, I think we need to be represented better. I there's a few organizations that are representing gaming professionals, but we've started the LGBTQ plus gaming professionals LinkedIn community. If anyone's following it, feel free to join. I just think that earlier in my career, I didn't come out, and it was a big burden on me. And then I realized like how, I was being very careful at the workplace, and I have had some small incidents too. And then after that, I realized, this could all be prevented if I'm just like, if I come out and be open with who I am. And not that I bring my sexuality into the office. It's just like,
Sure.
it's just easy. You're not hiding anything. One example I can give you is a few of gay colleagues or lesbian colleagues, I would invite them to this LinkedIn group, and they're saying, I cannot join this because this is public, they will see it, etc. And they would like think about this a lot. And I'm like, imagine how this burden lifted off you. Like that's the beauty of it. And I'm lucky that I've got to that place that I can do that. And I know a lot of people cannot really do that because they live in XYZ country, etc.
Mm.
I'm hoping, especially with groups like what we have in other communities, we get to that point where it's going to be just an afterthought.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah. So what's your take on, okay, so this could be controversial and this is going to be fun. So I feel like lately in like shows and stuff that we've launched or like watched or whatnot, it seems like there's a lot more LGBTQ type content than there are actually like people in the world. So like, let's say 5% of the population is actually gay, but like it seems like sometimes the content is that to like 50%, which I'm fine with like representing minorities and all that kind of stuff. But what's your take on like what's the right balance where you as a minority actually feel represented, like for game creators that are trying to think about how do I balance this stuff so that all of my players feel good about my content? Like, is there a right amount or a right line, or how does that go?
That's a great question. And I've been noticing that too, like kind of like an overrepresentation of LGBTQ. But we have to also keep in mind that, maybe in our circles, we come across this content more, but maybe 90% of the content that we don't see is actually not catering towards that. Maybe the channels we watch, the media we consume just shows that more. And maybe that alone will balance the scale more. One in gaming though, like I've talked to a lot of game designers, story writers, and some of them were really reticent about putting LGBTQ characters because what if people react aggressively, etc. And then there's another sect that almost uses gay characters. I've seen some UA videos about this as that trope, that very like feminine or very annoying LGBTQ person, and the UA campaign is all about that. It's almost like a fake ad kind of a ad.
Yeah.
I think the best way to do is like Love and Pies does this. They have a gay couple. I think one of the main characters' uncles is gay, and one UA video was just about the uncle and his boyfriend, and they discover something, and they're in love, but them being gay is not the forefront. It's not about that. It's more like these are characters that happen to
It's just natural. It's just light. It's not. Yeah.
it was just about them. I think that's the representation we need more.
So what I find interesting with like Story Bloom and user generated content though is like I feel like you have so many more opportunities to handle these things where like users can opt into the different types of things that they want to. It's almost like YouTube, right? Like if I want to watch a video about any kind of probably pretty much anything, I could probably find it on YouTube and watch it, right?
Yeah.
I would imagine that in the future, any kind of story that I want to read, I probably will be able to find it on Storybloom and consume that content, which I think it just makes the stickiness and the personalization of the overall game so much better because I can read the stuff that I want to read when I want to read that. Because there might be a time where I want to consume LGBT content, but there might be a time that I want to consume something else, and I can do that. So that's cool.
I think the YouTube example is a great one where we get a lot of inspiration from YouTube, from Roblox, these kind of communities where you might start from a video and the video leads to another video, and then now you have a main feed that feeds you. I mean, my YouTube is mostly Marvel Snap, specific like things catering to me. And then
Yeah.
we want to have a similar thing in Storyloom too, like specific genres you have, specific like art styles do you like, and maybe that leading to another, etc. And that's like the future of the project for sure.
That's amazing. Very cool. So I know we're about out of time here, and we are on the Master Retention podcast. So I do have one question for you, of course, and that is, what's one tip or trick or lesson you've learned over the years to, boost retention? Like, how do you keep your players, hanging around for longer?
Yeah, I think I'll go back to that like motivation scoring tactic. I think every game maker should do that. They should just meet their players. They should evaluate their game, see where they lie in that motivation index, and then try to cater to that. That's the like the motivation that brings the user every day. Whatever core whatever core loop they built, if that doesn't cater to it, or if it could do more. For example, destruction is an interesting motivation. Like some people just want to go in and destroy things. Some games are like that. And if your core loop is missing that, add more boxes or explosions that you can burst, etc. in your game that cater to that. And there's hundreds more examples like that.
I think you just described Royal Match and why it has taken over so well. It's like they
Yeah.
set up so many like beautiful things. All right. I love it. Well, Meric, thank you so much for joining us. If people do have any questions for you, is there a good way to get in contact with you?
My LinkedIn, my website, which is mericatesalp.com, is where they can reach out to me.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, man.
Awesome. See you, man.